Alright, welcome to episode 114 of What is Civilization started over. We've got a pretty big major episode with loads of cool events happening, and I'm very excited about it. Anyway, let's see what happens first today, because I forgot what happened last time. Well, we saw a war occur in New England in the last episode, and we saw the more spread of fascism and communism, of course. I believe there was a war in South Africa, where the South African countries united to form Big Blue Communist South Africa. Well, not united, but the communist won. Whilst over here in Japan, we saw the same sort of thing happen with the fascist South Japan and the communist Northern Japan. The Chinese Union broke apart, and then we have a new military dictatorship, Chinese Union, in the south, with Guangxi finally returning to its old borders. So that's cool. Italy and the Iberian Puppet State, they both invaded Catalonia, so now they're weird looking. But Italy's got more coast because they can just take whatever they want from this country because they don't have rights. Anyway, another thing we saw was this little guy down here called Southern Brazil, who used to be, I believe, a top 10 power at some point. They're pretty important in the world, probably. They changed to communism, which led this country to change to fascism out of fears that they would kind of push to the Pacific Ocean. And also, Brazil's pretty influential over the entire South American continent, so probably they had a part to play. However, this is going to spiral out of control even further, as over here in southern Peru, we see the southern Peruvian country change over to communist ideology, kind of copying the southern Brazilians, who I guess influence them a lot. They probably used this guy to get out. So yeah, their democracy is turned over in kind of a pretty violent coup, really. That one's not a democratic election, but the people supported it, so it's all fine. Anyway, speaking of spiraling out of control over here, an event has just occurred on the border between southern Brazil and northern Brazil, and it's in this stupid bit right here. There's no cities apparently, just anywhere. But there's big mining going on over here, and it turns out the southern Brazilians have been kind of extracting resources from that area without the northern Brazilians. Well, the northern Brazilians obviously aren't going to let them do that because they both hate each other very, very much. And even before they both had radicalist ideologies, they competed a lot between each other just because of stuff. And yeah, northern Brazil is going to use this to kind of be like, hey guys, I think we should go towards southern Brazil. And all the northern Brazilians are like, you know what, that's fair. We should definitely do that. So war begins between the two strongest South American countries, and probably some of the top countries just in the Americas in general. The strongest American country is Vancouver, and probably Vancouver, probably northern Brazil, then Vancouver, then New England, then maybe southern Brazil, then Texas, then America, and then the rest of them don't really matter, maybe California, but it's like a smaller California, but actually it's got Nevada and some useless stuff like that, and sorry Nevada. Anyway, northern Brazilian troops cross the border first because they don't really give these guys much of a warning. Also, the military is always ready and all that because it's a fascist dictatorship. What do you expect? So yeah, they did pretty well at the start of the war, taking over both these major urban areas near the border. I don't know why these cities over here look bigger. I mean they are bigger, but not in the real world. But yeah, Brazilians do a pretty good job there, and then start an offensive down here along the coast, moving into both of these cities and getting pretty close to this other one, and actually closing off this entire area. The southern Brazilians were kind of just working to establish a communist state, and they haven't really existed for all that long, 3 years or something, maybe not even that. They also, just because you need to justify your false flag operation, they begin a small incursion over here to kind of, just be like, oh, we're making sure we're keeping our resources. And those guys were taking those pesky southern Brazilians. Southern Brazil, of course, though, isn't weak or stupid or something. So they will also do some stuff as they send a lot of their forces up here, which is useless. But it's on the southern Peruvian border, so that's cool. And they're going to push in against this stuff because they're like, hey, you're just using that as a false flag thing. We're going to invade them, which doesn't really help. But also it's got some resources that they want. So they're like, you know what? Yeah, we actually want this, so we're just going to secure them for ourselves. The Brazilians, or northern Brazilians, didn't send a large force to take over that territory because it's useless as hell, apart from the resources. But well, it's not their big war goal. So yeah, they continue to push down over here towards the capital city, and the southern Brazilians are kind of realizing they're really not stopping the advance of northern Brazil towards their capital, as they really solidified themselves over here in this northeastern quadrant of the country and linked up all of their front lines. So forces are going to be diverted away from the north up here, where they kind of just took over some random stuff as well. So they retreat from this territory, and at this point, what they're going to do is move in towards the capital city area and push out towards this city and this peninsula down here. They also managed to move in the center and capture or recapture this city, and now they're doing a pretty good job in the central regions. From here, the forces continue on into central Brazil, moving from the city outwards and just kind of pushing over into the central areas of the country. The Brazilian front down here in the south kind of just forms a big line like this, and they're kind of like, well, this is the front line now, hooray! It looks something like that. So they go pretty interesting. However, as I mentioned before, the Brazilians kind of have a little friend down here called Chile or something, and Chile, they're going to join the war, of course. They are ideologically opposed to the northern southern Brazilians, and yeah, they're just going to send their forces across the border. There's not a whole lot here, so in the very early stages of the joining of the war, they take over like all of this stuff because there's no one there to stop them. So after that, though, they do manage to take this major city and also this one that's right on the border, or the border of their invasion. And at this point, southern Brazil is kind of like, wait a minute, we're fighting a two-front war. Now Chile is nowhere near as strong as northern Brazil. It's like a top 10 or 6 or power, so some pretty high number. So they're going to withdraw all their troops from this territory and kind of alleviate a lot of their incursions into this bit. So there we go, that's kind of bad. And that's so they can try and retake these cities, which they do because all the Chileans aren't super strong. So it's kind of fine. But it does mean they lose other stuff up here in the north. There should definitely be more major cities in this country, which just aren't. But the Brazilians make an excellent invasion around the capital city in the north, and they start to push towards some of these major cities in the central area of the country. So that's scary. The Chilean forces manage to recapture these ones or the city, and they push towards this one once again, but do not capture it. Apart from that, they're going to continue to move towards the Brazilian front, and at this point the cities up here in the north are very separated into the southern ones, and it's all going to kind of go badly as a force that's trying to defend the capital of this major city is captured, and at that point it's kind of severed off the major roads to this territory, and with the Chileans capturing this bit, they're finally connecting up, and this territory is separated from the rest of it, and this leads to mass hysteria and fear in the north, and eventually it surrenders after not too long. Following this, the Brazilian troops managed to move down into the south until they finally managed to surround the capital city. It's just two little bits. The major city over here has also fallen, and at this point, the Chilean forces make it all this way, which is pretty huge. And not too long, the capital is taken, and the rest of the country will collapse. So there we go. Now we can look at a peace treaty of the Brazilian War. Alright, and here's the peace treaty. As you can see, the Chileans got a lot less than what they wanted, maybe. But also, they don't really have a claim to this territory, so them getting anything is pretty good, really. The northern Brazilians were part of the same colony as the southern Brazilians, and effectively they have the same culture, or they've been separated for like, I don't want to work it out, over 100 years though. World War I in this series ended in 1928, World War II, and that's when we got independence, so somewhere around then. And currently it's 2050, which is a pretty huge landmark for the people of this world. They're like 24 years ahead of us. The power rankings have changed slightly, with New England now being in the number 10 spot, ahead of Western Australia, so that's a shame for you guys. But apart from that, everything is still the same, although with the new addition of Southern Brazil into Northern Brazil, they would probably be even stronger, which is pretty scary. But 2050, how exciting. Anyway, we can now head over to the left and over to the Middle East, because a major war will be occurring here. Persia. What do we know about Persia? They're pretty old. Yeah, they're pretty old. And they've got some really interesting old history about their country, but they have quite a few ops as well. They really don't get along with the Mesopotamians, so they hate kind of these guys. They don't like the Indians. They had a big war with them in episode 16, but they also really hate the Central Asians. So you can invade them, you could try to invade India, like navally, or you can invade Central Asia. And you know what would make invading Central Asia even easier? If you had a fascist ally over here in the Salmon country, who isn't actually your ally yet, but it won't be very hard to get them to become your ally. So what Persia will do is they go over to the Salmon country, oh my god, who basically turned fascist because they hated the Central Asians that much, because of Cold War stuff, and they blew each other up a lot. And they're like, hey, do you want to invade Central Asia? And they're like, yes, please, we'd love to. It'd be so cool. So they do the collab, and they're both going to invade the Central Asian country. So Persian forces begin the invasion down here in the south, moving up, just all across the border really, and starting to push towards the capital city, which is over here, this cool looking bit of Turkmenistan. However, at about the same time, the Salmon team troop forces will start to move across the border, pushing into this major city right over here, before, I don't know which, they probably focus on the central bit, so they're going to spearhead out from here towards these cities in the center. So, good for you. There's a few in the south as well they could try to get, and they also managed to take this one. The Central Asians are scrambling for help at this point, but they really don't have any they can get. So everything kind of sucks for these guys. As they lose another major city, Persian forces continue to spread out towards some of these more urban areas. Most of the urban stuff in this country is in the west, so kind of a shame for you guys. But Persia continues to make pretty good advances towards these major cities, capturing one of the outer cities of the capital, before finally closing it off from almost the rest of the country. But it still manages to fight on pretty bravely for a really long time. Salmon forces are now going to pan towards the south, moving in towards both of these major cities, which aren't going to have a great time in the war. Whilst Persian forces up here in the north start to spread out and kind of protect the cities they've captured, like hold the front lines better, as they move towards these four major cities up here in the northern parts of Central Asia, capturing these two and then make some slight advances into the capital. But the main stuff going on is they capture both of those major cities. At this point, they also take over the rest of the north, whilst down here in the south, Central Asia takes over the remainder. A few more weeks of fighting goes on until finally the entire capital area is captured. And that's the end of Central Asia. Alright, here you go. So the borders look pretty weird. Central Asia hasn't been fully annexed, but it's not good for them. Persia takes over all of this territory, which is a lot, whilst the Salmon country gains all of this, becoming a lot bigger. So that's pretty cool for these guys. Historically, they haven't really done a whole lot, but they've basically won out of the three. Those three Central Asian countries with the mid team and Central Asia. They basically won, and they will win. As a few years later, or like maybe months later, you see the full destruction of Central Asia as they decide to unite with the Aral Union to the north, who they're basically the same as. They're both really democratic, and yeah, they're both just chill guys. Also, just nukes are a thing. By the way, these ingredients, they've taken over loads of like post-Russia states, and they've got loads of nuclear bombs from them, so they've gained 8 more nukes. Europe, I think, is like the world capital of nukes, really. They've got a lot still there. But yeah, some of these countries are pretty scary. The Arab country's got 4 still. That's pretty crazy. And people like Morocco have 9, so that's... It could all go down if the next world war happens. But the world really hates nuclear bombs at the moment. So maybe it won't, and everyone might be fine. But probably not, because it's this world, and people die a lot in this world. Anyway, we can go to possibly our last war of the episode, because this episode's had like a lot of major conflicts, so I might just do these ones, but we can finally go over to the Japanese Isles, where another conflict will be breaking out between Northern Japan and Southern Japan, and it's actually another border dispute, but this time started by the communist one, but it's still the northern blue one, so yeah. These guys lost their capital city, or their old capital, which was this city, to the southern one after World War IV, and they kind of resent that, so they sent a lot of people in to like spy it and try to influence the elections there, like pretending to be citizens of southern Japan, which is a lot harder since they became fascist. And that's kind of the problem, is because all these guys are trying to flee back to the northern communist regime, but they're struggling, and the southern country captured a load of them, and then they just kill a load of them because they're communist spies, and that doesn't sit well with the northern government. So what they decide to do is invade the southern country. So their forces cross the border over here to the city and capture it, and also go over here towards this northern peninsula, also capturing that. The navy's going to spread out towards this city down in the center, and also towards this lakey bit, and they clicked up their front lines. However, the southern country was very much prepared for this sort of war, because I mean, who else are you gonna fight? Like Taiwan, Korea, Okinawa Island people? Yeah, there's not a whole lot of people you can fight apart from the communist Japanese person thing on North. So yeah, that's obviously who they're gonna fight. And they're also fascists, so they're kind of just always gonna prepare for war. But it gets a lot more bloody than they expected against the communists, as they take over 2 cities pretty quickly and move in to occupy this bit. However, their offensive up here in the north is just going to continue as they push around and recapture this city, and from that start their invasion up into the northern parts or western parts of the country. So that's pretty scary for the south. My throat really just died. But the south is going to do a pretty good job at finally taking that city and pushing around the fairly undefended southern front, as the southern country is just kind of focusing on actually capturing major cities at this point, as their forces are pushed into some pretty undefended Japanese lands. And it's when at this point that the northern country realizes they're in a pretty horrible spot, because this is all, they've got all their military down here and they're doing a good job, but these guys will probably capture that back. So they start to kind of flee from a lot of these less valuable territories, allowing them to be recaptured so that they can try and protect their homeland, which they do to a degree as they push the main offensive bit of this back a lot. However, up here in the north, this front is still expanding, and now it's pushing on up north as well, moving towards this city and getting pretty close to the Pacific coast. The capital city, or the new one, is under threat quite a lot. Whilst over here they also managed to push between both of these cities, separating off all the different cities, but the navy of this country is very good, so they might just be fine. But still, they're doing quite a good job there. They're trying to separate off this bit using naval bombardment, and they still technically occupy this island, so maybe it's all fine. However, it's definitely not still fine, as they push over, getting pretty close to the capital city, and at this point, the southern country decides to flee from both of these major cities to actually try and save their country. Forces move in near the capital city, and it's finally saved for a bit, because they reconsolidate the front line and now push in towards this city they've captured, moving through the south. And they may have lost the north, but they're kind of just pushing up in a full frontal assault towards the country, and they start to near the capital city. The front line will stabilize somewhat as it kind of moves back to something like this. However, the offensive is still going, and they've captured the capital city. Pretty soon they recapture this one and the stupid island they were putting naval ships on, and after that they just start to move up north and capture the entire country. And at that point, it's over. The southern country has won the war. The peace treaty is pretty simple, as the northern country fully consolidates power over the entire Japanese mainland, the main bit of Japan. They still have this bit if they want to invade them in the future, which they might, so that's kind of scary. Anyway, fascist Japan, that's terrifying. Anyway, something else we haven't talked about is ethnic cleansing in these territories, so I'm just going to do a brief run of what that looks like. Over here, all the Greeks have been moved to this territory, which is regionally the Greek part of the country. As you can see, if you go on the region map, there's the Greek zone. So all Greeks in the nation have been moved into this, and all the Roman people have kind of been forced out of it, so that it can become a fully Greek kind of ghetto state, which is pretty weird, but it's what the Italians decided to do. Elsewhere, northern people are genocided so they can kind of... What? Oh, wrong map. Whoops. That's probably fine. Genocided so they can connect up with this kind of exclave of Roman people up here in the, whatever it's called, region. What is that? Oh, Swiss. There we go. I forgot Switzerland existed. There's a lot more of the country that they really can deal with. So lots of French people are kind of forced over here into Poland, because Poland is a mostly Polish religion country, of course. So lots of the French Polish religion people are forced to go live in Poland, whilst lots of the Roman religion people of this country are forced to go live in Italy. So that's pretty weird. All these guys are just taken out of the country, and we even see the same thing happen in this territory, as Poland becomes basically a 100% religiously Polish country, which is pretty horrible stuff. Down here in this little country, they get genocide, so the African people of the country, or African religion people, I mean they're Spanish, but it becomes a fully Spanish religion country, which is also pretty horrible. The Bulgarians don't really do it though, they just kind of stick with it. Apart from maybe in the north up here, they might. To be fair, I don't know if Bulgaria really would genocide people. They might just accept it. The Greeks are kind of their friends, and the Ukrainians, I don't know. They might just tolerate them. You know who won't just tolerate them? This guy. So they genocide all of the European religion people in the central part of the country, and then they just start to connect up with these random exclaves or enclaves of Hijaz religion stuff in the middle of the desert. So that's pretty horrible. And then there's more of a growth of this religion as people are just forced to change their religion to this, which is weird and mean. Over here in the western parts of the country and over here, and then they start to move down the south and force people to change to this religion. And ultimately, Hijaz is probably the worst at this whole ethnic cleansing thing out of any of the countries in the world. I mean, they kind of started it as well, so it makes sense. But there you go. They are a really, really horrible country. Maybe probably not worse than Nazi Germany, but the world's just allowing this to happen, so that's why it's really awful. They can't very easily stop it though, just because there's so much. There's just so many alliances and all these webs of stuff going in between it. It's so complicated, and nobody wants to face another like nuclear war again because that'll just be extermination. I mean, this is extermination. But yeah, over here in the Central Asian areas, we see lots of these religious pockets kind of push back once again. They managed to connect up with this religious community out here. And here they're just pushing back all these areas where the Central Asian people used to have dominance. So that's kind of sad for them. Over here in the west, this religious line, which is a really old one, I'm pretty sure, will finally be broken as Persian people start to cross over into this territory and make it less Mesopotamian. So that's pretty awful for them as well. Basically, this is actually people just being genocided, but in some territories, like in Hijaz, they're being forced to switch over because this is a denomination of the Mesopotamian religion. But over here, this is like an entire different religion, and it's so much worse. There's the difference though between fascism to do with war and fascism to do with ethnic cleansing, like Persia and Hijaz and Rome, not really Rome, but Italy. Lots of their fascism comes from the fact like the ethnic policy and stuff. Whilst countries like the Salmon country don't really care, they're just kind of angry and expansionist. So that's for them. But over here to the Korean Vancouver country, they really, really hate all these stupid Europeans who made their way into their homes. They're going to try and push those guys out quite a lot, and they're going to be pretty successful as lots of these pockets of religion are just evaporated, and they connect up with lots of these other random bits of religious stuff. And overall, it's really, really horrible here. As people flee over to Utah and the Great Plains country, because I mean they're both pretty awful countries to live in. But yeah, it's better than living here, and quite nicely in a lot of these fascist dictatorships, they are allowing people to flee. They're like, we don't really want you in our country, so you leaving is actually good for us, so we don't really care. But there you go, this is what their map looks like. Brazil, for example, though, doesn't really care. There's religious European people over in Peru, but this area of whatever it's called, Carthaginian religion, the Carthaginian religion has home in Iberia, which is like the area that colonized their country, so they don't really care about that. Another one of the absolutely awful abhorrent ones is this dark green country over here, as just so many people die, like millions and millions. Their population triangle pyramid stuff will look absolutely horrible because of how much just awful stuff they've done to the people of their country. It's possibly worse than Hijaz. This is really, really abominable stuff. But yeah, they just non-discriminately start killing people, regardless of race and gender and ethnicity and whatever. Just, if you're not Hijaz religion, yeah, I don't like you very much. And this is pretty awful things. But they have a very big country, so yeah, we'll see how successful they can be with that. Anyway, that might be a lot of the fascist countries. Forgot about Ghana. Ghana's just gonna kill all the European religion people in their country, so they're all gone now. And it's now a pure African religion nation, which means there's some really weird groups looking groups over here. These ones are all going to kind of link up because loads of people have immigrated to this. Immigrated to this territory right around here. So it all kind of starts to join together, which is cool looking, I guess. But Nigeria and the brown country now have to take in loads of immigrants from this country because it's so awful to live there. So that's super great fun. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope to see you again next time. The series got very dark, but that's kind of how fascism works. Have a nice rest of your day. Goodbye.